First, they gave us the John Muir Trail. Well, they're back at it again, but this time with a little bit more desert and a little bit more danger thrown into the mix. This is a Kickstarter preview for Trailblazer, the Arizona Trail. Hello everybody, what is up? I'm so excited to have you back here on the channel today as we chat about Trailblazer, the Arizona Trail. In Trailblazer, the Arizona Trail, you will be traveling along the spectacular 800-mile long Arizona Trail as you take in the sights and sounds of the mountains, canyons, plateaus, and deserts, seeking out the amazing variety of wildlife. The road is treacherous though, so you have to make sure you're managing your supplies, avoiding poisonous creatures and bugs along the trail. As you are doing this, you are trying to collect gold throughout the trail and also earn your Arizona grit in the hopes of walking away being declared Trailblazer. Now, if you're familiar with Trailblazer, the John Muir Trail, you're definitely going to see some similarities with these games. There are a lot of differences though, so I'm actually going to go ahead and kind of give you a really overview of how this game plays and operates, and then we'll kind of jump into my thoughts on the game, who I feel like it's good for, and some of the differences between this game and then the Arizona Trail. And also I wanted to make sure to give a huge shout out to Mariposa Games for helping sponsor this video. So in Trailblazer, the Arizona Trail, it's a game for 1 to 4 players, and the game takes place over 8 weeks or 8 rounds. Each week or each round basically represents 100 miles of the total 800-mile length of the Arizona Trail. Every single week is broken down into 3 phases. We have the planning phase, the journey phase, and the recovery phase. So we're briefly going to chat about each of those right now. During the planning phase, the primary thing that you're going to be doing is actually gathering resources to help you during that week or during that round of the game. This is going to be really important because during this game, you're going to need all the help you can get. One of the ways that you'll gain resources during this planning phase are these little cards that are shown at the bottom of the trail. These cards are meant to represent the Arizona Trail Association, and so there's like little communities that are along the trail that people can stop at and collect resources. So those are one of the ways that you naturally gain resources during the planning phase. One of these cards will get flipped over and you gain whatever's shown. There's also a little puzzle down here at the bottom of the board called the crossed arrows. You have a little token that's placed on this at the beginning of the game, and during the planning phase you move that token to a new location and then gain what's shown. But gaining resources is not the only thing that happens during this planning phase. There's also the dreaded Gila Monster, which kind of meanders around the board, scaring you away from certain things. So how this operates is whoever has the least amount of gold at the beginning of the round gets to place this monster on any available location that will be available during the worker placement section of the game. So for example, I will go ahead and place it here. Now wherever you place this monster, it is very important. The card or the location that it gets placed on is off limits for everybody for the next week. And the area that it is placed, in order, if somebody chooses to go there, they still can pick, like for example in this situation, somebody still could choose to select either any of these 3 cards. But in order to do so, they would have to lose a health because this monster is in that location. So we'll talk about the different locations of the board in just a minute, but that is how this monster, this Gila Monster operates. Something else that happens during this planning phase is that players can acquire this really special cactus that's found along the Arizona Trail. Saguaro cactus. I think I'm saying that right. The player that holds this cactus for that particular week is actually able to gain certain bonuses throughout that week. So this is definitely a very nice thing to have. Once all of that has been completed, then we move on to the second phase of the week, which is actually the worker placement section of this game, which is called the journey. So at the beginning of the round, players have 3 workers. They're able to place these workers on select locations in the board, being able to generate certain things for them. The tricky part though is that one of their workers every single round has to be designated to this little section at the bottom of the board here, which determines the turn order for the following round. So technically players actually only have 2 workers going into most of the rounds. There is certain times throughout the game where players are able to gain additional workers, but for the most part, and especially at the beginning of the game, you really only have 2 workers to be able to try to do everything that you need to do. So let's chat about some of the locations that you can go to with your workers. The first is up here at the top of the board. Up here is where you're actually able to gain or see these sites along the Arizona Trail. So you place a worker, you have to pay certain resources in order to claim this, but then they will generate some sort of reward for you, whether that's resources or advancing along this terrain track, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Another place that players are able to place their workers are along either this Flora or this Fauna track that's along the outside of the board here. When you place a worker, the cost is shown at the very top of the placement spot, but then players are able to grab either pieces of artwork for their mural, which they'll be putting together on their own personal player board, or cards, which will help generate resources for them. So I just mentioned these mural tiles. I figured it would be a good time to kind of chat about what's happening on your own little personal player board while you're playing this game, because we haven't talked about that yet. But in the middle here, this is actually where you'll be placing these tiles that you'll be collecting throughout the game. So it's a little bit of a polyomino puzzle that you have going on your personal player mat, and it's nice because every time you cover up something on this board, you actually gain that ability or that resource, which can be very, very, very beneficial throughout this game. Off here to the other side of your player board, you will actually be storing your resources here on the board. It's a really nice, efficient way to store your resources. You also have certain bonuses along lots of the edges of this player board. So if you're able to accomplish those, you can either gain grit, you can gain gold, or you can gain resources by accomplishing those little bonuses, which is really nice. So the mural and these little pieces that you collect on the outside of the board are super, super important, because a part of endgame scoring is whatever tile or however many places you have uncovered on your mural at the end of the game, it will actually be worth negative points for you. So you definitely want to try to fill up as much, if not all, of your board if you are able to. Another thing that happens as you place tiles onto your mural here is you actually advance along this elevation ladder depicted here on the side of the board. As you advance along this elevation ladder here, you are able, as you get higher and higher, you're able to unlock certain bonuses or certain resources, which can be really beneficial for you. You're also able to spend some resources here to boost yourself even further up this elevation ladder, which can be really beneficial. One of my favorite parts about this ladder though is as you get, I think it's about halfway up this board, this actually unlocks another permanent worker for you during the worker placement phase of the game. So instead of just kind of having 2, you actually will have, well, technically you have 3, but one of them goes towards the turn order. So apart from those 3, you actually will get a 4th if you make it further or far enough up along this ladder. There's also a certain symbol here on this board, which if you reach it, you're actually able to collect and have one of 4 little creatures that will help you along your path. So you have a turtle, a roadrunner, a jackalope, and then you also have like a boar. Each of these animals come with a little card that again you put cubes on, and so if you choose to throughout, like on your turn, you can remove one of those cubes and then activate those abilities. So again, they're like little animals, just kind of like helping you along your journey on this Arizona trail. As you are collecting your bonuses throughout the game, something that you will be moving up on is this track here along the bottom. As you advance along this track, you're able to, again, it's a different way to gain gold, gain grit, gain resources. It is important to note these little state 48 cards here that are kind of in the center of the board. These are bonuses that can trigger at certain points of the game. Some trigger at any point as long as they're met, and then some, like at the end of, I believe it's the 4th and then the 8th round, these will go through and you'll go through and score and trigger those. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as you're advancing along this trail, is that, okay, I kind of have to keep in mind the certain goals that will be triggering soon and seeing if I can reach them so that I can get those bonuses if I'm able to. It is important to note that at some points during the game, if you are ever unable to pay the resources necessary, the resources that are required, then you will actually be forced to collect poison. So there's these handful of poison tokens tokens that will kind of be off to the side of the board. And it's interesting because you just kind of randomly reach in the pile, grab one, flip it over, and it shows a poisonous creature or something that you might find along this path in Arizona. And so when you do flip that over, each of these have a certain number associated with them, and you would lose that amount of gold. And unfortunately, these don't leave. These kind of keep hurting you and can hurt you and give you negative points at the end of the game. So you definitely want to try to get rid of these or just avoid them, avoid the poison if possible. This journey part of the game, this worker placement section, is kind of like the heart of the game. It's kind of the meat. This is where you're going to be doing all of your actions. You'll be going around, placing your workers on these locations, collecting either these cards, these tiles, or these collecting resources. So as you be doing that, that is all throughout this journey phase of the game. And once that is accomplished, once everybody has placed all their workers, then move on to the final phase. This final phase is called the recovery phase, and basically it's just kind of like resetting, getting ready for the next round. Everybody will go through and collect all of their adventurer workers back. You'll make sure to determine the turn order for the next round, so you'll go ahead and get that all set up for the next round. You'll refresh the cards, refresh the tiles. You will also replace the monster and the cactus tokens here on the board, just so they're ready for the next round and for the next players to use them. And so that's what triggers the end of the round, and then players will go ahead and go into the next round. And by the end of the 8th week, that's what triggers the end of the game. Now, the scoring in this game is really interesting. If you've played games like, I'm trying to think, Merchants of the Dark Road, that's the one that kind of comes right to my mind immediately in regards to this track system. But you have your gold and then you have your grit. And at the end of the 8th round of this game, you will take your gold and you will actually subtract it from your grit. And whoever has the most money wins. So you definitely have to be managing not only your gold, but you also need to be trying your best to acquire grit. And hopefully you don't end up in the negatives. You will also go through and make sure you minus any points for any uncovered space left in your mural. You'll also get negative points for any poison that you still have and you haven't been able to offload. Any cubes that are left on any of like your animals that were helping you throughout the game can also generate points for you. They generate 1 point each. These cards that you collect throughout the game will actually generate points for you as well, depending on how many sets you've collected of them. And along with Arizona stars, which, like for example, this card right here has a little star on the corner. So if the more of those you collect, the better, because they'll be able to generate even more points for you at the end of the game. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most points is declared Trailblazer and wins the game. So that's a very general overview of how this game plays. Hopefully that made sense and you kind of get a feel for how this game kind of operates and the mechanisms that's found in it. But I want to take a few minutes and kind of explain some of the differences between the Arizona Trail and the John Muir Trail, if you are familiar at all with this game. I definitely feel like the Arizona Trail is an updated version in a sense. Like there are differences, and there definitely are stuff that's going on in this game that wasn't going on in the first of the series, the John Muir Trail. But lots of this game does feel more streamlined and updated. The biggest one for me is the length of the game. This game goes by really, really fast, and if you're not careful, the ending can kind of sneak up on you, and you kind of get screwed over. The very first time I played this game, I was like, oh no, the ending is coming up, and I was nowhere near. I was definitely in the negative points by that point, and so I kind of got myself screwed over. But the length of the game, this definitely feels much quicker, much shorter. Another thing that I really love that they've updated in this version is in the John Muir Trail, it was always kind of confusing for me what resources you were trying to spend and then what resources you were collecting. It was never quite clear. It was always just a symbol of the resource, and it was kind of, you had to remember if you were supposed to pay that resource or collect that resource. But in this game, they definitely made it clear. Every resource that you're required to pay has a little negative symbol in the corner, so you're like, okay, I'm paying that, I'm not actually gaining that resource. So that was definitely a nice update to this version. The worker placement in this game was a lot more interesting in my opinion. I love how you have both of the sides, the flora side and the fauna side, that you're kind of fighting with other players over, and you have to, when you place your worker, you have to choose if you want the card or you want the tile, and you can't get both. And so it's definitely an interesting puzzle that you're trying to work around, trying to figure out the most efficient way to gain those, not only the cards that help give you resources, but also the tiles that you're placing onto your board. This one also doesn't have that race aspect where you have to move. At the end of every round, you will advance along this track, and I really love how they updated the turn order, because in the John Muir Trail, if you remember, there was like a little token that you could collect to be the first player. I never really found that super useful, honestly. I kind of ignored it most of the time. It just wasn't really beneficial to go there, but this time you have to spend one of your workers to claim a spot in turn order, which was, I personally really enjoyed that, because it was something else that you constantly had to think about. The 2 scoring tracks is also super interesting. I compared it to Merchants of the Dark Road, which is, I think it's the most recent game that I've played that has that mechanism in it, but I love it because you're trying to balance, not only you're trying to gain gold, but you're also trying to gain grit. So trying to figure out that puzzle was definitely not present in the first one, and I really enjoyed it in this one. In my opinion, this one, the theme makes a lot more sense mechanically, and I don't quite know how to describe that, but I feel like everything you do, it makes sense and it feels thematic, more so than the first one. Even everything down to like the poison. I love how you randomly select a poison card and you flip it over, and it has, a venomous creature that you encounter along the road, and so you have to, you take damage from that. So I feel like the theme comes through and shines a lot more in this game than the John Muir Trail. There were times when I was playing the John Muir Trail that I was like, okay, I don't quite understand why we're doing this, or this doesn't quite make sense thematically. I definitely felt the theme a lot more in this game. Something that I'm absolutely obsessed with in this game are these double layer player boards. It is so nice. One of my biggest complaints with the John Muir Trail was how you had so many tokens, and you were constantly trying to manage your tokens, and it was a mess, honestly. I love these player boards and how you just have your little cubes and you move them up. I really wish that more games would implement this type of system in regards to how you manage your resources. It just makes it a lot more smooth, a lot more streamlined, and I loved the puzzle of the mural. Again, I love polynomial games, I love tile placement games, so to kind of have this little puzzle going on along with the puzzle of the board, it was something that, for me, and kind of like my more crunchy mind, I just loved all of the different puzzles that were going on in this game. So for me personally, those were kind of some of the big differences in between the Arizona Trail and then the John Muir Trail. We're going to kind of go ahead and headway in a little bit into who I feel like this game is good for. That's something I like to do with my Kickstarter projects, is I have had the opportunity to dive into this game, and so who would I recommend this game for? So for me personally, I think that if you liked and enjoyed the first John Muir Trail game, I think you will like this one even more. I truly mean that. This game, it just feels like a more streamlined version of the first one, and it still has that hiking theme, and I just feel like the theme just comes through a lot stronger, and it works a lot better in this game than in the first, personally. If you are a gamer who likes a lot of puzzles and a lot of different stuff that you're trying, lots of resource management, trying your best to do the most efficient way possible in order to win, you will absolutely love this game. The resources in this game are so tight. You really have to be, like, literally every single action you do counts. There's no room for error. You don't have room to mess up, really. You have to always be on top of all of the puzzles that you have going on. Not only you have your elevation ladder that you're trying to manage to try to unlock, either little helpers or extra workers. You have your own personal little tile mural that you're trying to be the most efficient, trying to collect the most efficient tiles possible in order to fill that board up correctly. You also have this little your resources down here that you're trying to manage, on top of trying to collect and visit the scenery and trying to collect the certain groups of cards that will score you more points at the end of the game. So you have a lot going on, a lot you are trying to manage. Truthfully, it hurts my brain a little bit by the end of it, but it's a very satisfying puzzle when you are able to collect those resources that you need and be able to be really efficient with your turns. I really loved the kind of suspense of this Gila Monster here. It was really fun when it was a fun puzzle, because sometimes I would actually like if I knew I really didn't want somebody to get something, and I knew that that's what they were going to do, I would actually kind of try to hold back on my gold a little bit to see if I would actually come in last place, so that I could place this monster covering exactly what they wanted, taking away those points from them essentially. And so it was a fun little puzzle, and it was obviously really crappy when somebody else gets this monster and places it on exactly what you wanted. These little events, or what are these called, the State 48 cards that trigger at certain points throughout the game, really makes it interesting, because not only are you advancing trying to get end game goals, you're also trying to get mid game goals too, which makes it really fascinating, a fascinating puzzle, because you have all of these different things that you're trying to chain and combine together in order to get the most, you trying to get the most gold and also get the most grit. And so that combination of all these goals that you're trying to unlock throughout the game and make throughout the game was really fun. It's really interesting because they definitely feel, this game and then the first one, they feel like two different games, but they also, the only way I know how to describe it is they feel like they still have the same heart, like I feel like they still have the same core, but it is different. So for me personally, like who I would recommend this game to, if any of the things I just mentioned really kind of spark that interest, as something that, or sound like games that you would enjoy, I would recommend this, and I do think that it would be one that you would that you would enjoy. But kind of adding upon that, I genuinely feel like if you enjoyed the first John Muir Trail and you have that and you like it, I would definitely recommend looking into this one as well, because I think that this, like I said, I think it is a more streamlined, updated version of the first one, and I think it would be good to have both in your collection. So there you go, that is Trailblazer, the Arizona Trail from Mariposa Games. Huge shout out to them for helping sponsor this video for you today. If this game does sound like something that would be interesting to you, or something that you would like to look into a little bit more, I'll make sure to have a link to the crowdfunding campaign in the description below, so make sure to jump over to their page and kind of check out the finalized version of this game to see if it's something that you'd be interested in. And if you enjoyed this video, it would mean so much if you could subscribe to my channel. It really helps support me in everything that we're doing over here. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.